like let's say, for example, this house here was like a mansion or something, you'd probably want to take it apart and have different parts and sections and rooms be its own entity so that the player is only rendering that section of the world.
Welcome, everybody. This is a workshop about creating assets the community will love. This is being given by me, Shards632, and by SpaceGlitterUnicorn. We're going to talk mainly about how to build public assets that you can put in the public asset library that will be useful for other creators to use, and that are some things that you could submit potentially for the current open source contest. So I think that's our plan. Space Glitter, anything else you got to add to that?
I mean, really, it's all about putting really good assets out there for people to use, like you really want to share with the community like your best, you know?
Yep. So I'm going to get into the agenda, what makes a good asset, and then we'll talk about some modeling considerations, then some scripting considerations, and finally some publishing considerations, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to go on to like what makes a good asset. Primarily, you want to think about flexibility of your asset, the comprehensibility, and the marketing of the asset. So a lot of these things some of these items come from the competition sort of rules, like that kind of to guide you for the sorts of things that the competition is looking for. But in general, if you're building an asset and you're publishing it, you want to consider these items. So first of all, the flexibility. You want to make an asset that people can do something custom with, that they can build off of. I mean, it's not necessarily required, but I think it's desirable that the asset has some ability to be modified and tailored to that end user's environment. That might mean just like there's parameters that they can set. It might mean that there's mesh assets they can swap out. It may mean that they just kit bash the thing and they break it into parts and then reuse it. So just anticipate those different kinds of ways that your asset might get reused. People might want to break it apart and use some of the parts and put it together into something new. So think about not tightly coupling parts together that don't need coupling. And this matters both from the mesh side and from the code side. So anticipate customization, allow reskinning, and don't bake in assumptions, especially in the code, about where it's going to be used in the world. We see this sometimes with some of the meta assets where they have deep in the code somewhere, they've baked in some assumption about this asset can only be used at y=0. And if you move it up or down, it just doesn't work anymore. So like, try not to do that. Try not to build, or this only works if it's aligned with the 0-degree rotation. If you rotate it, it just doesn't work anymore. Like those are kinds of things. You don't want to bake those kinds of assumptions into your code where people can't move your asset around or use it in slightly different ways than you built it. So usually a good way to check that is like after you built your asset, like move it somewhere, rotate it, do something with it. Does it still work? Then good. Next, comprehensibility. You need to have your asset be easy for people to understand. It should be sanely organized. There should be a nice entity hierarchy inside of your asset where the different groupings are named ways that help people find the different parts, and that there are some entity groupings to sort of keep things organized, especially if you have a very complicated asset. And then additionally, very important for people who are trying to customize your asset, you want to make sure it has good documentation. There's a few ways, two different ways of doing this. Like you can have a text gizmo that you include in your asset, like it's something they're just going to see and then delete. But this text gizmo has a bunch of descriptions about, this is what the asset needs, what you're going to need to do to wire this asset together to use it in your world. And that's really useful, especially for VR creators, because it's a lot harder for them to open up the TypeScript code to look at it, but like a nice text gizmo sitting there that says, oh, you need to wire this to that, and you need to go do this thing or whatever is very useful. Comments in the TypeScript files are very useful, especially if the TypeScript's complicated. I forgot to mention like a good description on the asset itself, like when you publish it, and we'll talk about publishing a little bit later, make sure your description describes what your asset does and what its requirements are. I mean, you could even have like a URL somewhere out to a Google Doc, but that's a little fragile It'd be better to keep your documentation with your asset if you can. And the last aspect about what makes a good asset is the marketing. Like if people can't find your asset or they don't know what it is when they're looking at it in the asset library, which is the main way that people are going to find out about your asset, like it's just not going to get used. So you want to make sure that how you publish it really matters in terms of getting people to use it. You want to give people good upfront information before they even pull the asset into their world to look at it like, hey, this is going to be something that I want to use. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later, about what good publishing looks like. Then I'm going to now hand this over to, oh, one more. So sorry, good asset ideas. Here's some examples of good asset ideas. These came from the open source competition rules. So multiplayer game helpers, for team group creation or voting or team selection UI or setting user roles. Some other ideas are configurable mechanics like weapons or tools or vehicles that people can just drag out and use. And then a third idea is mobile capability helpers like customized camera control scripts or mobile specific game mode templates that help people write mobile games, or touch interaction utilities and examples that are using focused interaction in some interesting way to do some mechanic. Some of these might be just drop in and go kind of assets like the weapon or tool or vehicles. It might just be like you spawn the thing and then maybe set some parameters and you go with it. Some of these other ones are possibly going to need a little bit more wiring into your world to make them really work for you, or maybe some more customization even at the code level to make them work for you. Is there any questions so far about what makes a good asset and the good asset ideas
I seen a question before, but it looks like it disappeared. I
in
believe it
the
was from,
chat?
yeah, I believe it was from Samson, something about some scripting. But other than that, I don't see anything in there.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to hand it over to you now. So let's.
All right, perfect. So let's talk about modeling magic, more specifically, good topology. It's good to keep your vert count within reason, depending on what type of item you're sharing. So in all theory, when you share your assets, you want to make sure you're setting people up for success. You want them to want to use your items. And so like having a good vert count really sets the tone for their worlds. You want their worlds to be successful because you want to spread that love to all the creators, right? So let's talk about the different levels of assets. So you have your small assets. Recommended is 50 to 500 verts. So we're talking about cups, books, plants, chairs, and handheld tools. Small items, small playable items, or even like environmental scatter. Next up, we're talking about some medium sized assets. We're ranging from 500 to 2000 verts. And for that, we're talking about tables, maybe arcade machines, treasure chests, small vehicles, and statues. I mean, really, you're the artist, seasoned to taste, but really try to be reasonable with these vert counts. Also, we're going to the large assets. So you're looking at 2000 to 10,000 verts. So we're talking about buildings, detailed trees, full characters with gear, large machinery, even landscapes. I believe that, and I truly have done this myself, is you could make a whole landscape that is well below that 10,000 verts. Um, and really, my rule of thumb is, for the most part, let your texture speak, for you. Like you can beef up a world with a bunch of verts, but yeah, you're getting that smooth geometry. I wouldn't base it on that. I would base it on more on good texturing. You have your baking from high poly to low poly. There are so many different ways to make really make robust assets. So, side note, and this is kind of like for a later on thing, but in games that you build, you have items called hero pieces. These are assets that would be considered important for gameplay. paying more attention to details on these, but not necessarily in most cases, depending on style. And that's overall if you are building a game and you have these pieces that are super important. Maybe a character is holding those pieces and you can see it up close. You kind of want to make that a little more pretty. And that may be where you want to spend more of that data, but really it's not necessarily just vert count. You can also um, hike up with the texturing as well. Mesh Mojo. So keep your pieces free. If it's meant to move, wiggle, or swing, don't glue it to something static. Meaning, like, don't join pieces that you know people are going to want to take apart, right? So, for example, a door fused to a wall, that's a big no. No script can open it if it's stuck forever. So really, like that's, if you want to make a house, which I have made for you guys to see, you want that door to be separate, right? You want people to be able to use it rather than, you know, turning off collidability if they're trying to move through the door. You want things to be functional. Um, Texture treasure maps. Atlas and trim sheets are your besties. Use them wisely to keep things smooth, shiny, and efficient. So, really, if you're building like a full asset set that you want together on one asset, be sure that when you're building that, make a whole trim sheet so that everything fits on it. That way it's more efficient for future creators and users. It's just ideal, an entire
Yeah.
world can be built with just one small set. Go ahead, Charts.
Oh, yeah, you don't want your asset to cause someone's draw calls to go skyrocketing because you have a zillion different textures in it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Perfect pivot power. Set your pivots like a pro. A well placed pivot means easier placement and scripting magic without the headaches. So let me give you guys a good example of what good pivot is. So a good pivot. Well, however I want to say it, but let me get that for you.
While you're talking about that, like one more thing to think about when you're doing your mesh generation is if you're going to be building something like that's an environment asset that people would drop in, try to make sure that there's no single mesh entity that's wrapping all the way around the player because if so, if any part of that mesh is in front of the player, the whole mesh will be drawn, even the parts that are behind them, and that can just cause a lot of extra load on the rendering engine. So if you do have something that people will be inside and looking at just parts of it in front of them, maybe think about ways of decomposing your sort of environment mesh so that the things behind them are in different mesh entities than the things that are in front of them, so that the render engine can drop them out when it's drawn.
That's so true. Like, let's say, for example, this house here was like a mansion or something. You'd probably want to take it apart and have different parts and sections and rooms be its own entity so that the player is only rendering that section of the world. So let's talk about pivots. So here I have a door, and of course, I would want it to swing open. I'm going to just reset this really quick. So set origin to geometry. So let's say I would want in world for this to work. If I were to rotate here by Z, that is not good pivot. So if I were to import this into Horizon with this pivot, you won't be able to script it accordingly unless you are, I guess, parenting with an empty. Am I correct, Shards?
Yeah,
Um,
you could put some of the work on the creator using your thing to like break apart your asset and then add the correct pivots in. But if you can kind of anticipate, like maybe you're not going to provide a scripted door, for them in your asset, but you're like, there is a door here, you know, and maybe someone's going to want to script it some way. Maybe I'll be nice and like not like bake it into the wall mesh, and then B, maybe put a nice pivot on it so that like it rotates around the hinge. I mean, this is just an example. We definitely have seen these cases in some of the meta assets where they have provided these really lovely, space station assets with these great walls and doors, but like the door is part of the wall. So you're like, well, I can't open it. So that's annoying.
that's correct. Yes, there have been plenty of pain points with that. So let's correct that in our own assets. So quick demo on how to create to correct this pivot is I use this 3D cursor here to align with a vertice. So I'm going to take this into edit mode really quick. I usually like to go into this vert select. I'm going to select the most center part of this door asset. Then what I'll do, I usually like to just zoom in really quick. I will do shift right click. Now the cursor is in the proper location. So I'm going to tab over to object mode. And now with my object selected and the 3D cursor in the proper location, I'm going to go to object, set origin to 3D cursor. Now the origin is in the correct location. So if I were to rotate by Z, now I have a properly hinged door. So that is perfect for setting your pivots. So let's move on.
Now we're going to go on to talk about some of the scripting considerations for your asset. So this stuff on the right here, before you freak out, this is just like some visual example. You don't have to like look at it in detail. I'm just trying to show some like example stuff here, and I'll talk briefly about it, but this is not really the focus. So the first thing you want to do when you're writing your scripts is like try to use descriptive but non-colliding script names. You want to make sure that your TypeScript files have good names that are easy for people to like understand, because they have never seen your code before, and when it drops into their world, and it's going to show up in their VS Code editor, it'd be nice if it was like, oh yeah, this thing came from that asset. That's where the script just appeared from. And likewise, like don't use like really likely names that the creator probably already has, like player manager or gun or lobby or HUD or something like that, because they probably have a gun script or a lobby script or a HUD script already. If you do drag something out of the library that's using a script with the same name, you're going to get a little warning in the console, and it's going to rename the script with like a number after it, and just kind of looks messy. And then they have gun and gun 2 in their world. And they're like, wait, which one's which? And I think I would just suggest choosing slightly more descriptive names for the things in your asset. Second most and very, very important thing is that your assets, especially the scripts, they have to be self-contained or have very clear dependencies if they depend on some other asset to function at all. So, but really, like the scripts should work out of the box. Like if you drop it in the world and you go and try to interact with things, it should just work. With the exception, possibly, if you need to go and turn on some API that you're using, which is not usually on, or like it requires a PPV to be set, or a quest has to be set, or player motion has to be turned on. If there's any kind of actions like that, you need to really clearly document that, probably in your asset description when you're publishing, but definitely somewhere very prominent in the code or with the text gizmo or something in your asset, so people are like, oh, in order to make this thing work, I need to turn on player motion, or it's just not going to do it. If you have other assets that this really needs to use to work with, make sure you list those in the description when you publish and in the code also. And if you're doing something that like it's supposed to just be a locally scripted thing that needs to be assigned to each player, make sure you call that out. Oh, you need to put this in an asset gizmo in order for an asset pool gizmo in order for it to work. And just make it clear in your documentation about what your dependencies are going to be in order to make your thing function. And you should use the props definition in your scripts to really define what the public interface is for your asset. Like, what are the things that you expect people to be able to customize in your asset? And don't put things in the props definition that aren't customizable. Try to keep those for things that like these are the stuff that you really need to customize, and use variables for stuff that or constants or something like that for things that are really part of the interface of the asset. And importantly, again, with documentation, document what every one of those prop definitions does. Like, why is it there? What does it mean? Especially if you have things like attack rate and there's a number, make sure it describes somewhere in the comment, like this is seconds or milliseconds. This one does, it's just scrolled off the screen here. So this is just an example. So this is from the gun asset that Meta Horizon provides. So I would say that they're not quite like they called their script gun, which is I think not a great name for the script because it's going to collide if there's another, if you already have a gun you've been working on and then you try to bring in their gun. Now it's like you have gun two. It might have been nice if they had used a little bit different name that was a little bit more descriptive about this particular asset. But they do have a lot of different properties that you can customize on this. And they all have descriptions about exactly what it's going to do. Some of them, they have default values for a lot of the number ones so that it kind of works out of the box without you having to configure it. So you want to think about doing something along this lines. I mean, you can put the comments off to the side or you can put them above, it doesn't really matter, but make sure you have those commented and make sure you have thought about the ways in which you want your asset to be customizable and make sure you have them listed. I tend to also organize these properties such that the more likely to be customized things are first, and then if there's like internal object linking, like entities that have to be wired up that are sort of more internal to the asset, I tend to put them later because that way when you're looking at props in the property panel, like the important things are on the top and then the less important things are sort of scrolled down towards the bottom. So scripting considerations continued. Comment all the things, like try to comment your classes, comment your variables, comment your methods, comment any tricky bits of code that are doing something that are maybe slightly advanced so that people, when they look at it, they're just not perplexed as to what you're doing. Don't go overboard with commenting. Like you don't have to comment, an if statement says, this is an if statement, like don't do that. Just comment the important stuff, but it's really useful to have all your variables commented and your classes commented, like how they're supposed to be used and such like that, so that somebody coming into your code can kind of understand how to customize your asset. Try to decouple your code and use abstraction, but don't go overboard. You want to make sure that you haven't like spaghettified your components together such that like there's no way to like take them apart and use them separately if people wanted to. I would recommend, sending events more often than not between your different components than like doing function calls between your components, although there is certainly a place for function calls between your components if they're very tightly coupled. But like don't make that your default go-to, because then you're importing all the components into each other. And then if someone wants to just use part of it, then it's very hard to figure out how to extract that part. Also, if you have like singletons or something like that, make it really, really clear like that this thing has to be part of the asset and the rest of it's not going to work if this like player manager bit, that's doing something is not included. Running on this empty object is not included with the rest of the code. When people pull out their asset, they shouldn't like delete that part. That the whole thing, that make it clear, like, what the different pieces in the abstractions card are. And I mean, I would use ABC's abstract base classes sparingly because they tend to make it a little bit more hard to follow, but sometimes they make some things more reusable. The important thing is to make sure you include any script modules in your assets. When you publish an asset, any scripts that have components that are attached to entities in your asset are automatically sucked into the asset. But any modules, which are scripts that don't have components that are attached to some entity, they do not get sucked into the asset, even if you're importing them from one of your scripts. So make sure that you don't publish something that's missing a key component. Like it works fine in your world, but then you publish it and anybody who uses it doesn't work for them because it's missing this script module that you didn't include in the asset. So if you have script modules, make sure you spawn a script gizmo for them because you probably won't have a script gizmo for it by default. And make sure you include that script gizmo in the asset definition, in the asset template when you create it, so that when people pull it out, they still have that referenced script module there in their instantiation. And then finally, I'm sort of a fan of copyright and licenses. I think that it's good for just clarifying what the usage is of things and asserting some of your rights over your code. So I would recommend, putting a copyright notice at the top of your scripts, just like, copyright, the date and then your name. But because these are being shared publicly and you're really giving these away, I mean, the kind of license that you should use for this is something like CC BY or CC0 or the MIT license or something similar, which basically gives people free reign to reuse it. I think that it would be a mistake to like publish some asset with like an all rights reserved license in it, because then that's kind of a useless asset. People can't use it for anything because you've reserved all the rights and you're not allowing them to use it for their own purposes. So if you are going to go and put a copyright and a license in your files, make sure you use some very free license. CC BY means people can, it's Creative Commons, and they need to give you credit for it. CC0 means pretty much public domain. And the MIT license is pretty close to public domain, but not quite. It's like a step back. It's like you are still copywriting it, but you are allowing them to freely reuse it and remix it. So this example code, this is again from one of the meta assets. This is for their shop. And as you notice, they're commenting like this class and they're commenting this variable. And so I think they have a lot of good commenting here. I don't know if anyone's looked at this code, but this is probably one of those cases where they've gone overboard with the abstraction a little bit, like with these templated abstract base classes that extend component and add these weird logic type plugins. If it's really useful for your asset, maybe do that, but this makes it harder for people to understand and what's going on, and can make it harder to reuse. So like, just be cautious about too much fancy coding in your assets. Yes, I use a font that makes my comments all script cursive-y. Someone just commented about that. Anyway, so going on with script considerations. So when you're packaging up your assets, like there's two different ways you can go about packaging them up. And we'll go and look at this asset that I made in just a moment. And we'll just quickly discuss some of the ways it works. And then this is actually already published in the public asset library. One way you can publish it is like group all the parts together and put it into one asset. This is like an all-in-one solution, like it's everything you need, but it probably requires people to break it apart to use it. So in this case, like I have a gun and I have like an ammo box. I included like a text gizmo in here inside the asset that kind of talks about what the gun and the ammo box do. So like if you're in VR and you're looking at this, you're like, and you pull it out, you're like, okay, I kind of see like there's some stuff here and I'm going to have to go and look into these further. So this guy has like a text gizmo up here. There's got a script for the gun, which is a reskinnable gun and keeps track of ammo across transfers. There's a shards ammo script, which is running on this guy, and it has ammo that reloads the gun if it's matches the gun. And then the shards ammo event. So this is like this case where I was talking about where this module has the events that are shared between the ammo and the gun. And so it's not really part of the gun. It's not really part of the ammo. It's its own little script file imported by both of them. So you need to make sure that you spawn a script gizmo for that and put that script gizmo in the asset, or else when people pull this out, they're going to be missing that script. So this is like sort of for an all-in-one solution, but it does require people breaking things apart to use it. So the other kind of option for packaging things is like the pre-separated drop and go, like no need to like break anything apart. And so these are the same assets, but like they're published as two separate assets, as shards gun and shards ammo. Here you can imagine like people can just drag these out and go. Like there's no need to like delete anything or ungroup anything. You could even put this in like an asset spawner. Like people would just drag the asset into some asset spawning code. So you don't want to have, for instance, have text gizmo or weird things grouped together. You just want it to be the gun or just be the ammo. So in this case, you notice that for each one of these assets, I had to put the shards ammo event script gizmo, spawn out a gizmo and stick it inside the asset so that that ammo event script would be there on each side of the gun or on the ammo box side for people who wanted to use it. And then I think that I'm going to quickly jump over to show some code here. So here is my Horizon Rails desktop editor. And you can see, for instance, like here's the public asset, which has them together. And here's, the gun separate. And here's the ammo box separate. And so these, we go and play with one of these, like we can go and grab one of the guns and, it shoots. It has a little ammo remaining. Go pick up, reload the ammo, and it plays some more. I also made, this is the same scripts and everything. This is just a reskin where, oops, the grab handle got a little bit screwed up. Where if you try to pick up a not matching, oops, I dropped again. You try to pick up a not matching ammo box, it doesn't work, but if you pick up a matching one, then it does reload. So this just shows like that this was customizable. Everything in there was just, all I did was dropped a new mesh in and changed some parameters, and then it was a different kind of gun, a different kind of interaction. So if we look quickly at the code for this guy, so here's the gun. Here, for instance, you can see my little copyright notice, released under MIT license. I'm trying to comment all the interesting things. I'm commenting the class. This is the gun class, but the gun class is in a shards gun script. So this is not going to interfere with, if someone already has a gun script in it, it's going to come in as shards gun, and so it's not going to collide with their existing gun. This is the component name inside the script, and so these can be, short and unique. It's just make sure that your script module names are different. Commenting all the different things that can be configured. I sort of separated like the internal bits from the sort of more public bits. Comments on how all that thing works. And a very simple little HUD UI. This is very tightly coupled, so I put it in the same file so that these two things can easily talk together. This is the ammo box, again, commenting what it does, talks about how it, matches the gun's ammo type, then it works. Comment. And then these are the events. These are the events that are shared between the two scripts. And this is the thing that has to be put into its special script gizmo so that it can be imported into each of the, both into ammo, shards ammo, where it's importing the events, and shards gun are both importing the event. So you need to make sure that that little script gizmo exists and is added to the asset when you're publishing. How do the scripts come in and not conflict each other? Well, I'm using fileback scripts. So that those two ammo events are the same script. And so it's not going, it already knows it's already got the script in the world. So they don't conflict with each other. So if you got to remember that when you're using fileback scripts, you're using fileback scripts, like the script gizmos don't really matter anymore. You can just spawn a new one. Like if I wanted to make a new one of these, I can just spawn a new gizmo. And now I have a new copy of it here, but this is the same script as that script, which is the same as these other ones. These all point at the same stuff in the back end. So all I did was when I was making this, I just made, two of these, and I stuck one in, this asset. This one has a shards ammo events in it. And then, this other guy here, he also has a shards ammo event in it, but these are the same. They're just like references to the same fileback script, so there's no conflict between them. Anyway, I think that is all I had to say about that. And any other questions on that so far? Again, these are already published, so you can go and pull them out of the asset library to look at them and their descriptions. They have nice little descriptions, such about how they work.
So let's talk about publishing magic tips. Sparkly guide for showing off your awesome asset. First off is you want to give it a brilliant asset name. Pick a name that instantly tells creators what your asset does. You know, give it a cute name, give it something cozy, give it something exciting. You know, it really depends on the asset, of course, but you want it to pop. A catchy cover photo. Choose a picture that shows off your asset's powers and makes creators pause mid scroll and go, "Ooh, what's that?" Give it a sparkly description. Add juicy details. Tell folks exactly what your asset does, plus details like vert count they'll need before dropping it into their world. Accurate category subcategory. Put your asset in its true habitat. Don't sneak it into the wrong category. Creators will thank you for keeping it easy to find. And magical tags. Help people discover your creation with descriptive tags. Think of them as glitter trails leading explorers to your to right to the asset. Sorry. All right. So let's do a quick demo on how to create that asset. So here we are. I made a cozy little cabin for you guys, and along with shards that has made the doors open. Magical. All right. And this is unfurnished, so you could actually go in here and just create and make this your own, basically. Create the space for you. Okay, so let's talk about making this asset. So what I'm going to do in build mode, I have this asset and inside of it has all of the meat and potatoes, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select this guy, right click, create asset, and it's already labeled. I called it Cozy Little Home. Now I need to give it a description. So I actually wrote one out. So I'm going to just pop this in here really quick. The description I gave it is this cozy little home would be the retreat getaway your players will love. Use this as you like. Only 772 verts with two textures, only two textures. So you have the house and then you have the glass texture. So I'm going to go ahead and create. All right, perfect. Now, what I'll do, right? It saved in, I'm just making sure it's saved in the right location. I think this one's it. Is it?
I think it should have saved into whatever folder you had open, right?
Right? Okay, just making sure. Just making sure. Okay, so now that I have that done, I'm going to go over to the right of the main 3D viewport, and I'm going to go here and say make asset public. Now what I'll do is I'll add a thumbnail. Okay, so that's right. I should have made a screenshot first. So first off, I'm going to make a cute little screenshot. Normally, like me, I would definitely dress this up with some trees and make it nice and cozy. However, right now this is all I have. But you style it how you like. Just make sure that you have proper camera angles, have it centered really nice, really showing off the asset. You want it to look pretty and inviting. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick screenshot.
You want to make it as square as possible because I think it will do weird clipping
That's
otherwise.
correct. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this out really quick. And please don't mind my desktop. It is a mess, guys. I'm just saying right now.
You can't see it.
Cozy. You will. Hold on one sec. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and make that asset public. This thumbnail, choose from my device. Okay, you won't see it. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to find that PNG and press import. Now I'm going to select a category. So you guys in the chat, tell me what category should I put this in? Help me out
Food.
here. What do you think? I have interactive, I have environment, I have structures, I have interiors. The right one. Structures, structure. Okay. All right. Structure wins. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and click on structures. Okay. So additional category. What else? We have walls, windows, doors, stairs, buildings. Buildings. I think that one is correct there. And now we're going to add a tag. Let's see. Help me with tags, guys. Sound off in the chat. I need a cute tag for this cozy little home. Of course, I think one of them is, of course, cozy, cute. Okay, small home, log cabin. Okay, yep, that's true. Cottage. Yes, animated doors. Because that is true. Like it actually comes with that extra feature that people might want to kit bash for themselves. Like it's a script that you could use for anything else if you're savvy to that, you know? A template. I saw glass. All right, glass. I think that's good, right? What do you think, Shards?
Yeah, it's good. I don't think you want to go too overboard with the tags. You just want to sort of have things so if people are searching by tags that they find something, yours might pop up if they're like, I'm looking for a cabin. They're like, oh, I got a cabin here.
Right. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on save. And now it gives us these cute little tags right here in this section. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'm going to label this as so you guys can also find it that way and clicking on make public. Perfect. Now you could actually find that in the public assets. And there you go. You guys can use that for yourselves. And now let's take a look at the functionality of that door. Good job, Shards. Look at this. That's a magic door right there. So
Yeah.
if you guys do furnish this, can you guys like post it in the forums or in the Discord? I would love to see how you guys dress this up. This would be so exciting. All right. So I think
I think one final thing is that if you're submitting this asset to the mini challenge, if you notice on the right, if you scroll down there a little bit, there's this interactive asset mini challenge. If you can scroll down on the right over there, basically,
right here.
you can, yeah. So this has not been submitted to the mini challenge. There's a way somehow, I guess, before you I think you might have to look at it from within your asset. Maybe it doesn't, maybe you've clicked on the one here, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Uh
know why you can't, why that's grayed out now. Can you click on it
all right.
again in the folder?
Yes.
Is it, it's weird. I'm not sure why the submit to competition is now grayed out. I would have hoped you could have done that after you publish the asset. But,
There is a guideline here. We can take a look at it
hmm,
together. Why not? So, how to submit an asset in the interactive asset mini challenge. Determine the asset you'd like to submit. Let's see. Publish your asset to the public asset library. So it should be highlighted actually if I were
yeah, I don't know.
to
It was highlighted, I think, before you published, but I guess maybe you have to unpublish it before you can publish. I'm not sure. We'll have to look into that
possible.
and find out
We
what's
will
going
play
on.
around with it, but guys, like seriously, feel free to play around with that. I'm sure you guys will will figure it out. It
But for
should be
sure,
easy.
make sure you submit your asset to the mini challenge if you're adding this public asset as something that you want to
Yes.
be part of the competition.
Please do. I can't wait to see your assets and I'm sure it's going to be awesome.